Good morning, Dr. Gehlmann. As you have read my email, I'm Eun-Jeung Lee, a PhD candidate at Institute of Korean Study at Freie Universität of Berlin. It's great pleasure to meet you, and thank you very much for taking the time to join this interview today. So before we begin, I would like to address a few administrative matters briefly. This interview is part of a research project organized by Korea European Center at Freie Universität Berlin, funded by the Korea Development Institute, KDI, in South Korea. As part of this project, we are conducting a series of expert interviews with scholars across Europe. The interview will be recorded with your permission. It may be shared on our center's official YouTube channel later. So now I would like to briefly introduce the background of our research. Overall, over the past few years, our team has conducted a quantitative study on how Korea is perceived across the European countries. However, this year we decided to shift for the qualitative approach, focusing on in-depth interviews with leading experts in Europe. So we wanted to go beyond statistical trends to better understand the narrative, experience, and meanings that shape how Korea is represented and understood across the various cultural and political contexts. Our current theme focuses on public perception of Korea in Europe, especially how these perceptions have evolved over time in relation to Korea's cultural presence and political development and academic representation. In that sense, we are truly honored to speak with you, Dr. Gehlmann, today as an expert on South Korea in Germany. So your perspective will be extremely valuable to us. So I'm personally very excited to hear about how you first became interested in studying Korea, and could you tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in studying Korea and Korea-related topics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eun-Jeung. Thank you for inviting me. My own particular journey in studying Korean actually begins with me studying Chinese. I was already in high school when I started studying Chinese because I was mostly interested in traveling to foreign countries, and China seemed very far away. So I started studying Chinese language at just a public Volkshochschule. But it was more like a general cultural course. It wasn't really deep. But it raised my interest because I always also was interested in history. So I also looked into Chinese history. And then I started studying for 1 year at the University of Trier, Chinese studies and politics. And I very quickly realized that the politics part is not so interesting for me because it was all about foreign policies, and it was all like, particularly in Trier, there were teachers that were very engaged in realist politic understanding. So I was constantly like confronted with counting how many tanks does China have in comparison to America and stuff like this. So it was really boring to me. But the Chinese language courses were interesting. And so I was looking to expand a little bit on the studying culture and language and history. And I was good in Trier, but then I, for personal reasons, moved to Berlin after 1 year and continued my studies there. And when you go to Berlin, you had to choose not two different fields, but you had to choose like a major and a minor. So for my major, I chose Chinese studies. And then when I had to choose a minor, I didn't want to choose like politics or anything like this again. So I chose Korean because it was available, and I hadn't seen that anywhere else, to be honest. That's how I started studying Korean language. So at first, if you do minor in Berlin, you really only have language courses to do. So I was mostly engaged in historical and cultural courses on China. And at the side, I had language courses of Korean. Beyond that, I didn't know much about Korea at that point, to be honest. I knew, of course, the history, that it was a divided country, that East Germany, where I'm originally from, had closer relations with North Korea, although that was also very complicated. And West Germany had better relations, of course, with the South. But I didn't know much. I barely remember, I think, one time when I was, of course, much younger, watching on TV during the the sunshine policy of Kim Dae-jung, how the gates were open and the trains were passing through the border. I remember stuff like this. And then, of course, because I was always interested in sports, I knew about Koreans at the Olympics and at the World Cup, stuff like this. I watched the World Cup, of course, in Korea, when it happened in Korea. And I wasn't in Korea, but when it happened in Korea. And I remember stuff. So this was basically my understanding of Korea at that point. So learning the language, of course, was very new to me. And then what really solidified my interest in Korea was when I went to study abroad in China during my studies and during my bachelor, because I was more rather by accident. I was chosen. I didn't really choose it, but I was very happy with the choice. I went to Dalian, which is in Liaodong, Liaoning province in China. So it's really at the tip of the Liaodong Peninsula. And there's a big, not only is there a big Chinese Korean minority living in that area, but there also at the university where I studied, there were many Korean exchange students. So of course, when you study abroad, you get often more in touch with the other exchange students. So I had lots of contact with the Korean students there. My roommate at first, when I moved into the dormitory, was a Korean student from Jeju, interestingly. And yeah, so I spent a lot of time with the Koreans, practiced my Korean, maybe a little bit more than I've practiced my Chinese. Yeah, so, but I also attended Chinese classes. And then when I come back, I invested a little bit more time into the Korean studies too. And then also wrote my my BA thesis when I finished Chinese studies about a topic about that concerned Korea and China. So about the volunteer army that went into the Korean War. And then in my master, I continued all this at FU Berlin and went then to Korea as an exchange because I was in China during my BA exchange. So I went during my master exchange to Yonsei University for a year. And then when I came back, I wrote my MA thesis on Goguryeo. So the position of Goguryeo between China and Korea, the whole history, Northeast history problem, and how Goguryeo was presumed. And then because I had studied, I guess, like ancient history and was already a little bit familiar, I studied with classical Chinese. Professor Eun-Jeung then kind of asked me if I want to join this project on Korean academies. And this is when I've basically moved more strongly into Korean studies at the first point. As in my PhD research, I basically looked at how the Chinese academy system was received in Korea. And this is how I ended up in academia and as well in Korean studies. So I come actually from a Chinese background, but also or a Chinese studies background, but also studied a lot of Korean studies since then. And now since I moved to Bochum, I'm fully in Korean studies, but of course I still like very interested in Chinese studies. Sorry.
So like probably like your academic journey like starts from the Chinese study to Korean study in the middle of your study abroad, and also like moving to Berlin maybe like influenced a little bit of like opening up the Korean studies as well.
Yeah, because it was available, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like and then you start to contact with like more various Korean just encounters, and then you also like you probably like have learned a lot of like Korean language as well as like while you are living in Yonsei University 1 year and in Korea, and then you have seen probably the change of Korea and Korea's cultural influence as well, probably.
Yeah, I did actually, because the time when I lived in Yonsei was 2011, 2012. And when I came back, which was like September 2012 or August or something, there was like a particular song that got really famous during that time, which was Gangnam Style. And all of a sudden, and you heard it first in Korea. It was interesting because like it was really like you heard it in Korea on the streets. And you were already, okay, there's this like one particular song that's everywhere all of a sudden. And then I came back to Germany, and all of a sudden it was interesting to see because it was on the radio in Germany. And that was something I never seen before, yeah, that like a Korean. So I think that was like one of the things where I first like, okay, like there is like some pipeline here, or there is like some connection that things come over. But like, I think besides Gangnam Style was really big at that time. So I saw really experienced like, okay, it was in Korea, and then all of a sudden it was in Berlin as well when I came back. It was interesting to see.
Yeah, like compared to other scholars I have interviewed, like you are the youngest scholar
Oh, okay.
now I'm interviewing. And so like probably you can tell more about like your own experiences as well, maybe given your extensive, like maybe almost like 1 decade about Korean study and Korean culture in Germany. The presence has changed a little bit. I would like to hear your perspective on how probably like the German public perceives Korea today. Probably it's the process of like you're entering into Korean study as well, because like 2010 is the probably like the tipping point. Korea start being present in Germany as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, what was very different when I went to Berlin to study and started studying Korean language, the classes were rather small, I would say. It was already, from what I heard, they were smaller before. Yeah, it was already like getting a little bit bigger. But the students were mostly, I think, students of Korean background. Yeah, they were like from immigrant families. They came like earlier to Berlin and then studied Korean language there. So it was mostly like second or third generation Koreans that were studying Korean language or were interested in Korean culture. There were much more of them, I think, than it is now. Yeah, so now it's at least in Bochum where we are, it's much more German students or other backgrounds, yeah, but not so many with a Korean background. That is very different. Of course, it was much smaller, much less people. And then, of course, when you told people you were studying Korean studies, they were often like, "Oh, okay, what can you do with that?" Or what, like, I mean, of course, with the older generations, they were often asking you to, what Korea you're actually going to, right? They were often like, "Oh, you're going to North Korea or South Korea, and isn't it dangerous?" You always had that one too, yeah, because of course the political situation was often back and forth, particularly then in 2010, 2011, right? When so right before I went to Korea, there was lots of the sinking of the Cheonan ship and then the shelling of Yongbyon Island and stuff like this. So there was always people like a little bit more, "Oh, okay." The political situation was often in the forefront if people started talking about Korea in particular. Yeah? People didn't know anything about the history. I think now people don't know much either, besides the Korean War and stuff like this. But before that, but also culture didn't play that big of a role. I mean, there was like niche, I think, people that were interested in like dramas and music already at that point, some people too. But it was really small. It wasn't really a wide background. And that definitely changed. Yeah. So I think you mentioned 2010, 2011 as like a tipping point where it changes. Yeah. And definitely I felt that too. Yeah. There was some change in how Korean culture was perceived. Before it was really like a niche, and then it became that also other people talked about, yeah, I have seen that drama. I think at that point mostly illegally, because there were no real ways to like watch like Korean dramas in some legal way, but people were still getting there mostly through with subtitles. Yeah.
So like moving back from the point that where you came back from the exchange student, maybe like was there any particular event or moment you could like notice maybe like the visual shift in how Korea is like perceived in Germany, like even more better, like in related maybe like culture field or like media representation, any kind of like the moment you could like notice particularly?
I mean, definitely like the Gangnam Style thing. I think that changed quite a bit. Although I always felt it was a little bit reductive how it was perceived, right? It was like this funny song kind of, right? And was like kind of wacky, you know, people didn't really relate to what it actually meant or what it stood for. But just with the exposure it got, that was very interesting to see, because I haven't seen anything Korean get that much exposure in media. And of course it was consumed rather like without knowing about it, like I said, what it means or what it stands for, was just really this wacky kind of song. But afterwards, I mean, couldn't really think about if there was like a particular event or something that I mean, then I started noticing more that like Korean bands were giving concert in Berlin in particular. I think you could see that, although I wasn't too, I didn't really, just without being too interested in it, I noticed that it happened. Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that is one thing. And one thing maybe that also played a bigger role than it sometimes people see is gaming. I think, yeah, all of a sudden you had like, I actually don't know when League of Legends came out, right? But all of a sudden you had like Korean players that were kind of famous among like a certain scene of computer games in Europe. I think that played a big role too. Yeah, obviously you had like events where people were going and saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna watch this gaming thing because there's some famous Korean player that plays there." Or
So
something.
then maybe like if I give like more specific question about like you have been also like in Berlin at FU and Korean study like and working for your project,
Yeah.
but then like you start to notice like some more German students like getting into the Korean studies like and you see the like more number of people wanting to study Korean
Yeah, but that
and
was already, I
what
think, before I went actually to Korea myself. Yeah, I came back from China in
ah
2009, and then I took more Korean classes because I did a little bit more other Korean, not just language classes, but also some other classes, just because I was interested in it and it was part of my minor. And the numbers definitely grew. Yeah, I think like after 2008, 9, like there were more students all of a sudden in the language classes as well. It was really like I went to China, and when I came back, all of a sudden there were much more students. So yeah, already before 2010, that trend kind of started. And then definitely after 2010, 11, 12, the student numbers exploded from what I mean, what I can tell. I mean, the real explosion only happened later, it seems to me, like particularly like around the Corona time, right? At least here in Bochum, from what I told. I moved to Bochum, or I came to Bochum to work here in 2022. And I was told the biggest classes they ever had, like the first semester classes, they were always in during Corona time, so 2021, 2020, as well a little bit, and then like when I came here, it was still pretty big. It was still like quite a lot of students all of a sudden. Where we had like 100 first semester students that sat in my history. I do the lecture on Korean history in the first semester and the one on basic methods of Korean studies. And in the first 2 years I worked here, there were always like at least 100 students in these. I mean, they didn't all always show up, but at least they were
Yeah.
registered in the class. So that was when
Wow.
when I really noticed, okay, this is really something big. But also I think when I taught in FU, there were already quite a lot of students. Yeah, it was always pretty full. Or that more, even more when I always compared it when I started studying Chinese. When I came to Berlin, there were always like lots of people in Chinese studies classes. They were always very full too. I think that reduced a little bit with the time.
So like you do you think like the Chinese study like the people who wanted to study Chinese and like maybe like shifting to the Korean study in
I
your
don't know. It's
opinion?
difficult to say. There were because the crowd that was studying Chinese studies was very different from the people that study Korean studies, I think. Yeah, the people that studied Chinese studies were often interested in business. Yeah, they had a business background. They thought like, okay, China is the future to make business, and then like you would could find a good job if you could speak Chinese in a German company because German companies were investing in China. I think the people that were studying Chinese studies were very like this, and then maybe this doesn't work out, or the prospects of like the economic cooperation weren't that close. So I think it reduced a little bit. And but the people that were studying Korean studies were often drawn to Korean studies, I think, for Korean, particularly South Korean culture, of course. Yeah, so like pop culture, and that was their first step into it. Then also you had always some people that came from a Taekwondo background or something like this, but that I think reduced. It was mostly, I think, which is cultural background too, I guess, but it was mostly like popular culture, like so K-pop, gaming, I think too, K-dramas and stuff like this. Yeah, it became a bigger draw, I think, for the students.
Okay, like only like we were just only talking about like much about like the students who are entering into the Korean studies, but like what do you measure like what do you think like the general public of German people also like well informed start to be well informed of Korean
About Korea?
cultures or of South Korea in general?
I think because you have so much more students and young people that are into the culture, I think naturally that like trickles down to their parents and their grandparents, right? Because they have to, okay, if you're interested in your kid's life, then you probably notice, okay, all of a sudden they like this Korean band, and then they get more informed with Korean. And sometimes we get like also older people that join the classes because they're interested also in pop culture, but also they often then have like a different, like a little bit a different angle. They're also a little bit more interested in politics and history. And I think they often get it through their kids. You know, their kids become interested in that, and then they have close relations and partake in it. So something like this. But in general, I would say, yeah, it's rather still superficial. Yeah, with like maybe the generation of my parents or like a generation above me. They know about, I think they know more about Korean, the Korean division. Maybe because on the news, which is mostly reported, is like, okay, North Korea makes some crazy thing, how it is always reported here, and then like that gets into the news, and then they have like a so North Korea more as like, you can say like, oh, they're so crazy, so we don't want to be like them or something. Yeah, so it's like kind of used in a political sense as a signifier of craziness, which is kind of stupid, but yeah, it happens a lot. And South Korea, of course, as an economic partner of Germany, as like a political, as a democracy, just in this sense, it's often perceived. And yeah, but I think more recently also like as a cultural, yeah, exporter. Yeah, as an exporter of culture.
Yeah.
It becomes
Okay,
more.
like,
Sorry, you go.
so like when it comes to like more political dimension, for example, like in 2002, December 2024, like December, how do you think like recent political development in Korea, like such as martial art law, and then as well as like the impeachment and leadership change, like there were like many political events have affected Germans' public view over Korea, has changed also, influenced?
I think so. Because I was actually interestingly, I was just discussing this with my students like some weeks ago too, what they think about it, and I was basically presenting them with two narratives. Yeah, I was saying, okay, the whole martial law disaster or the whole thing, we can view it as really negative and say like, okay, you know, the Korean democracy is still so weak that you could have a president who just decides, okay, I'm going to have martial law, and I send like the troops into the city and basically declare myself above the law in a sense. Or you could say, okay, but it didn't work, right? So, and you can say, okay, it didn't work because it was stupid, or I don't know, he didn't plan it properly or whatever, and it could have worked. Or you can say the Korean democracy actually, or civil society, is so strong that they prevented it from happening. And I think all the students, and I think that's the general idea also in Germany, they more leaned, okay, Korean civil society is this strong that they kind of prevented this from actually working. So there's, I think, a lot of admiration towards what happened there. And I think it was also reported in this way here that like, okay, the people actually stopped this from happening. And I think that's the general view towards, particular, interestingly, if it's juxtaposed with what happens in America, right? And because in America, you know, you have like all these things going on right now, and also in 2020, like already, where people are like, okay, the Americans, they just like not only endured all this, but then really elected like a crazy man again. And then in Korea, the people just say like, okay, we don't want like a crazy president. So I think it's always like really exemplified as a positive example. And in the minds of the people, it's a positive example how strong Korean social society is, and how strong it can like clap back at this political. I think so this is very strongly viewed here. What people don't know is how strong the political divide in South Korea actually is, right? That you have like still like a very conservative, strong right that is like still protesting and stuff, and how what is the word for it? Not radicalized, but like how polarized Korean politics is as well. I think this is rarely discussed here. It's mostly, okay, like the Koreans were able to stop this martial law declaration. That is very admirable viewed here, and the students were all leaning towards that.
Like so when it comes to like the political perception of Korea in Germany, like would be can say that like more positive, like even though there was like such a how do I say, like drastic political event like last few years.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, like then like maybe like when it comes like we talk about like more popular culture and representation. For example, like we talk a lot about like the popular culture already. The influence it was immense, but like what kind of like specific drama or films and cultural product do you think like people have influenced by like in Germany?
Right now, or you mean like in general, looking at the last few years?
You can say like these days or even like last decade, you can say that like when it comes to like when you like pick specific things.
I mean, let's if I go through what I remember. I mean, I already mentioned Gangnam Style, but I also remember that I talked to random people who didn't have anything to do with Korean studies at that point, and they were mentioning Boys Over Flowers, like really long ago, like more than 20 years ago soon, right? It's like 2008 or something like this. So when I first studied Koreans, or when I was like just coming back from China, I think at that point it was like that was really had interestingly an impact, and so people really were talking about that one. So I watched it too, and I don't know, it was interesting. But and then I guess the next one would be Gangnam Style, I guess, really. And then of course you had like some movies that were really big and that made a big splash in I think Old Boy is even older than some of these things. I think I remember even watching Old Boy when I didn't have anything to do with Korean studies, I think, or was just like interested in East Asia in general. So there were some movies, so there was always like an interest in the Korean movie scene, I think, and then they also won some prizes. But of course, then there's the big ones, Parasite, of course, which really, where I, for the first time, I mean, of course, I was already working at FU, but it was, I remember some professors from some other completely other disciplines, right? Nothing to do with East Asia. Yeah? They were like, I don't know, Renaissance studies or German history or stuff. And they came and said like, I watched Parasite, and it's such a good movie. It's such a good satire of like, society and social problems and stuff like this, and such a good movie. So they were really, and I often had the feeling they were seeing it kind of removed from the Korean space, but it was like just a universal kind of story, that was of course told in Korea and had like Korean cultural markers that were interesting for these people, but the story itself was removed from Korea a little bit, what it was about, because it was more universal, what everybody experiences or what people were thinking they're experiencing, and so it kind of spoke to much more people, similar with Squid Game, which I thought it was a little bit more superficial or more on the nose, not so subtle as Parasite, but of course Squid Game played a big role. Yesterday, I in the last two meetings of one of my classes, I made like the students, because the first semester students, I made them kind of present what they why they study Korean studies. I asked them to talk a little bit about what is their background, and one girl one student chose Squid Game. And so it still has some I think like still some significance for why students are interested in Korea. And interestingly, they get kind of so because Squid Game presents, I think, a very negative view, right, like of Korea or like general capitalist societies, and it's still also like kind of seen as universal, right? It's Korea, and all these bad things, like they're happening in Korea, but they see it more as something that happens all around the world, where Korea maybe is just a little one step ahead and discussing this. So I think that was one that's of course like the big cultural exports from Korea that really made a big splash here in Germany.
So like probably although like the K culture or Korean culture start from our own authentic like Korean needs, but like maybe like it influenced rather more general public over the world. Maybe like going through the platforms like Netflix or other more international platforms, right?
Yeah, I think Netflix plays a big role. I don't know if this is so relevant for your research, but I had a discussion also with Korean professors about, because we had some Korean professors coming in, and we talked about that Netflix is such a big player now in the producing K-dramas and stuff like this. And one professor, he said like, okay, but these dramas, they're not produced for a Korean audience anymore, but they're produced for an international audience. So sometimes it's really hard for the Korean audience to relate to them anymore because they don't really reflect Korean realities anymore. But what they reflect is what like an international audience maybe want to see or want to or how they imagine Korea sometimes in a sense. And I think this discussion exists as well, right? Because you have this K label. And what actually falls under the K label now? Yeah, is it like only things that are produced in Korea or they're all about Korea? So it's an
I mean, like,
interesting.
that's one another topic, but like still it's very relevant because like when you start from the very localized entertainment business, but like then once you expand it to the global audiences, then like you have to kind of like adapt into the mainstream like the culture,
Yeah.
right? So they have to change also like
And Netflix does that, right? They are geared a little bit more towards an international audience. I mean, you still want to have like the Korean-ness about it, I guess, whatever that is. But of course, you want to still have the Korean audience as well. So I think it's an interesting balance you have to find, yeah, because all of a sudden you have such a big market that you have to, or you want to satisfy, or you want to put your product out into, so you have to make it accessible for that too, or reflect the people that are there. I think it was probably a thing that exists in K-pop for a longer time than in K-dramas already, right? Because K-pop was already more international before the dramas became international. So they also had to adjust between like an international audience and a domestic audience. So it's an interesting balance you have to find there.
Yeah. So like these were the more generally like we were talking about medias and other K labeled culture. But like I just want to also like ask about something more in your daily life. For example, like in Germany, like you have seen probably the change, like some products or restaurants and cafes or like even the groceries like in Germany has changed about something import and export from Korea. So have you or seen and also other people like generally like going to the Korean restaurants or like eating or purchasing groceries and trying to cook some Korean related food, and this change has you have also like encountered in these days?
Yeah, a very good point. I totally forgot about this, but yeah, Korean food was always very present too, of course. And I remember first in Berlin, when no, not when I first came there, but around 2010 it must have been. Maybe I'm wrong in the dates, but for the first time, I mean, there were always Korean restaurants in Berlin, but in smaller towns there were none, right? But like in my hometown in Jena, for example, yeah, it's a smaller town. There was never a Korean restaurant till last year. Now they have a Korean restaurant too, like in a town of like maybe 100,000 people. So I think nowadays you have like Korean restaurants everywhere, right? Or at least in all bigger towns. But at that point, it was if you wanted to eat Korean food, you had to go to a bigger city. In Berlin, they had. But then it really where it changed a little bit in 2010, around that time too. I think for the first time I saw there was a Korean restaurant in Berlin that was called Korean Angry Chicken, and it was like a chicken place, right? In Kreuzberg, and it was really stylized and it was really cool, and they had DJs playing there, and they had parties there, and like we just like went to get Korean chicken. So there it really changed it, like it wasn't just like Korean food where you sit down and like you get like the rice and like the panchan and all that stuff, but it was kind of a street food, you know, that you get on your hand and it's cool and you eat it like stuff like this. So and then I think Kimchi Princess was like really big restaurant for a long time in Berlin. I don't know if it still exists. But so that was really hip, yeah, to go there. So it changed a little bit at that time. So Korean food was considered kind of cool. I guess it still is a little bit. It's all and because it's always also a little bit more expensive than Chinese food, right? If you go to a Chinese restaurant, usually like they make it quicker. It's like it's more like considered this like kind of fast food that everybody takes, and then Korean is they also have fast food with the chicken and stuff, but it's considered a little bit more hip. And then of course nowadays in the supermarket you have like all kinds of ramen, I think like Korean ramen or like instant noodles. So yeah, you see this one, and I think when the second season of Squid Game came out, I saw posters everywhere of KFC Korean chicken burgers here. I haven't tried it, but I think it was like some product tie-in and stuff. But like, so yeah, so just like, okay, the Korea is like a label for kind of a certain food that also became more
I
strong.
mean, like funny thing is like I've seen even like the Squid Game doner kebab store even right now like emerged in Germany and in Berlin as well. So
Oh,
like
really?
for example,
I
like
didn't.
yeah,
We don't
like
have that yet here, no.
no. But what about like in Bochum? Like, do you see like many Korean restaurant has been opened up?
Um, yeah, I mean, in Bochum, there's one really close here that has been, I think, around for 10 years or so.
Mm.
And they, interestingly, they make an advertisement where it says Gangnam Style Kitchen. So I think they probably wrote like the Gangnam way, a Gangnam Style wave a little bit, right? So it must have been 10 years ago when they, or like 2012, more than 10 years
Yeah,
ago, when they
yeah.
first opened or something. So they were, I guess they were using this to like market their restaurant a little bit. But I think there were also like always restaurants around here because of course there's a rather big Korean community for a long time already in like the Ruhr, North Rhine-Westphalia area, right?
Yeah,
Like that.
sure.
So there were always Korean restaurants, but at least I wouldn't make judgment because I don't know too much, but I at least know one new restaurant that has opened here that is Korean food in the last 2 years.
So also like when you go to the, for example, like Korean restaurant or a Korean related grocery shopping something, then you see more just general German people like the public just go to eat and now like they recognize Korean food as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think they it's like go an event, you go like eat something nice. There's a Korean restaurant. Some of the places are also close by to like some business, and then people just eat it like because they offer like a quick lunch menu or something. So it's a good alternative to get like Korean food. What is interesting, what I haven't seen so much is Korean takeout food, right? Like if you like order like people order like sushi, like and then get it delivered to the house. But I haven't seen so many takeout places where you can like get delivery of Korean food. It's more like, I mean, maybe chicken, okay, but this is like a general thing. But mostly it's like you go to the restaurant and actually sit down and eat.
Like a dining food, most of them.
Yeah, or
the
quick lunch,
restaurants,
but you wouldn't get like in Korea where you can get everything delivered. I haven't seen like that you get like Korean food delivered here or that people do that. Like if you go to Korean restaurant, most of people I think want to have more like an experience. That's why I guess like the barbecue restaurants are more popular now these days, right? Because you can like make your own meat or it's in front of you. So
yeah, so basically we have been touched upon most of the questions, like, but from your perspective, what are the main challenges, like for the future, like what would be the like main challenge or opportunity for Korea's image, like in Germany, like to make it better, or in near future, like how we can, like as a Korean government, like if you think so,
yeah.
like then like how can we like even make it better for the Korea's image in Germany?
This a good I mean, the image is already pretty good, I would say, right? So, I think, I mean, I'm biased because I work at university, and I think like one thing that's going to happen is that we have to maybe give this the people that are really trying to study Korean language and Korean culture that they kind of see in a sense what they're doing this for, right? Because I think the numbers are going down a little bit of students, at least in my experience. And I think one reason is, of course, is like more economical constraints that people think like, okay, yeah, we live in a tough world, yeah, it's like economically difficult. So I don't study something that I want to study for my hobby or something. So they study rather something where they think like, okay, I get a job with it later on. And I think sometimes it's difficult how this like Hallyu wave or a cultural wave, how it translates into actual like perspective for the people. Yeah, it's often just seen as like a hobby or like something you do because like, you're interested and you want to travel there and you want to speak a little bit of Korean. But only little of the students they have like a view, okay, I want to work at a Korean company because they have no way of doing this. Yeah, so it's so far removed still for them. Yeah, I mean, Korean language learning is hard. It takes a long time. It's very different from German. Korean corporate culture is very different. So they don't. I think most of them they don't see really like what to do with Korean studies in the long term. And that's why they only treat it as like a hobby. And then as soon as economical hardships hit, they study something else where they think like, okay, I get a better job with this one. And I think there has to be like some more discussion about what Korea wants to do with this cultural influence. Yeah, like is it just to promote like a good image, or is it also to bring people to Korea and engage with them so they engage even more with Korean culture, or is it really just like to bring more tourists in? So I think it has to be a little bit clearer what actually the goal is.
What about like, can I ask you something more about like you
course.
said like the number of students like enrolled in your university has been a bit lowered. Then like when it comes over like the student of just not student, maybe like the language learners, the number of the language learners has stably there, or like also like the number of
No, I think I mean all the students that enroll also have to study the language, and there's only few that only come for the language. Yeah.
okay.
So because there's different options. We also have the Landesspracheninstitut in Bochum, which basically teaches Korean as well, so you can learn languages there without having to study Korean studies. And I think their numbers stay the same. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So I think the interest in the language remains, but people often don't know what they could do with like actually studying the culture and the history. So of course I try to give them perspectives when they come, but once they're there and we can show them, okay, there's these opportunities for you and you can work there, or you can like go in this direction, you know, you can go in the art direction, you can go in politics, you can go into business. There's certainly opportunities there, but when they choose what to study, first they don't know really what Korean studies can do for them, or what like opportunities they actually have. But they don't choose maybe why they study it. I mean, I think it's a general trend, of course, like Germany's population is going down a little bit. So of course you have less students. Maybe it's also related to some I think in North Rhine-Westphalia, there's some change in the high school policy, or there was, and that maybe has some ramifications now. We see how it develops, but it was our student numbers went down a little bit in the last 2 years.
Yeah. For example, like I guess like it's going to be the same here. Like I'm not pretty sure like we can, if we apply the same period of time like to Bochum and FU, the number of students has been down. And also as well as what I noticed that like most of the European countries, like the professors told me the number has been down, especially when it comes, it's very related to the economical downturn in Europe as well.
I think so.
Particularly also in the UK, like the point, she made like point, like the professor from UK. And then, although the influence of Korean culture has increased, they notice, but it's nothing to do with the number of students in university.
Yeah.
But what about like something else? Is like how do you think like we could develop more academical or cultural cooperation between Korea and Germany? It's not about like the number of students, but like how we can even further develop the linkage of like academic linkage or cultural cooperation between Korea and Germany.
I mean, you have to have money for that, right? Money is like the driver behind it. And I think especially Korean companies are still holding back on that. And I think that's a big difference between what Japan was doing and like already since the 90s, where like Japanese companies were heavily investing in academia as well, right? They were like sponsoring professorships and stuff like this. And I think the Korean companies, they do this in Korea, but they don't do it abroad so much, right? And this is where I think the future consumers are of Korean, not just Korean cultures, but also Korean technical products is something we didn't talk about, right? So like so many people have Samsung phones, use LG televisions, right? Drive Korean cars now. So there is certainly like, I think, a market there too, but the people don't even realize that, I think, often, right? I think many people that use Samsung phones or LG or Hyundai cars, they know it's Korean, but they don't really know, okay, the company, it's just another company for them. And because these companies are not so present often on the in the discourse here. So I think maybe that is a way, yeah. So that the companies invest a little bit more in their image as well, and like maybe do that through cultural cooperation projects, yeah, where they like bring maybe students from Germany to Korea and like invest in this exchange, right? Give opportunities for exchange like this. I think we recently had a guest lecture by one of the former students of Bochum who studied here before I was in Bochum myself. And he's now engaged in German teaching in Korea. He teaches German at the university level in Korea. And he's also part of some association for German studies. And they recently had like a new project where they basically make an exchange between German high schools and Korean high schools, so that Korean high school students could go to Germany for a week, and then the German high school students would go to Korea for a week. So I think if it already starts at that level and stuff like this is supported, maybe not just by the Korean government, but also by Korean companies, I think that would have a positive effect, and not just for the Korean image, but also for Korean studies, of course. Yeah, maybe we would get more people that are interested in Korean studies in general, but also give them like a view. Okay, yeah, here is like this companies behind it, and they help with this one. So certainly would raise the image as well, I think.
Okay, like we go to the end, the final question. Maybe is there anything else you would like to add that you feel more important for understanding how Germans perceive Korea today?
I don't know. You just raised this question about like the numbers going down. I think we've been discussing this internally. What is the reason for it? And of course, we were like when in I think summer last year, I think K-pop Demon Hunters exploded. We were all like, okay, this is like the next thing, and like now there's more interest generated. Again, like it's like always something, Squid Game, Parasite, some band coming out, BTS, of course, stuff like this. So this generates interest. So this translates into students, more students that study Korean studies. But that didn't happen. So we were discussing maybe if like Korean popular culture has already become so universal that it's not even seen as you don't have to learn Korean or understand Korean culture to do this. It's like already so accessible to everybody that like you don't have to like go to the university and study Korean language and stuff like this to study. So that would be an interesting, cultural moment, I guess, or cultural movement that like the students, like, the people think, okay, this is like just how I wear blue jeans now. That I don't consider it American anymore, right? It's like part of my daily life to eat instant noodles like they do in a movie, or I think it's still a little bit more removed from this, but it's an interesting development. So it would be interesting to see where this goes. Yeah, if we actually can talk like about a boom of Korean culture for some time that now goes down, or if this just is a temporary thing. Interesting to see. Like, so I'm interested in it too. My field is more history, so that's more stable. Yeah, but of course I follow this. I follow these current developments only because of my students. Yeah, I always ask them, why are you here? What is interesting for you? What do you want to know about Korea, or what is interesting to you? And that seems to play a role, because none of them mentioned K-pop Demon Hunters, which is interesting. Yeah, so it seemed to me they weren't really considering this like this is something that introduces me to Korean culture or gives me interest in Korean culture. Yeah, it's just something else completely. When they talked about what they're interested in Korean culture, it's more rather music. So BTS. I learned about some new Stray Kids is really big apparently now. Like lots of my students talk about Stray Kids, and some new bands I never heard before. Assemble 24 or something. It's like they're always like on the pulse. Yeah. So
But this is like one interesting question, because like recently the Ministry of Education has reported like in 2025 like about 국가 이미지 조사, a survey of like the image of Korea, and then like they start to ask like almost like 13,000 people across the 26 countries.
Okay.
And then like they ask them like how they perceived Korea, and favorable or like positive or negative. And but interesting, like the most positive attitude toward Korea, the country was like Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Philippines or Turkey. But like the least favorite country was like Japan and Germany as well.
Germany as well.
Yeah. German was
Oh,
like on the
interesting.
on the bottom link. Like I could just send you later, but like it was very interesting point to like. But this is like just the just popped up question. Maybe you don't need to answer it. Like, but what do you think? Like maybe like is it like the problem is about maybe the questionnaire or like survey?
Yeah, I mean, it could be also my bias because, of course, the people that study Korean studies, the students that I get into touch with, of course, are very positive about Korea, right? So they wouldn't study Korean studies if they think they have a negative view towards it. So maybe, and yeah, it's an interesting question because I think it's a little bit maybe related to, I don't know the questionnaire, so what I could imagine is that like it could be related to, if you watch Squid Game, if you watch Parasite, of course, it's very critical of Korean society, and they get like a very, I guess, like some people get like a one-dimensional thinking. Okay, Korean society is basically like a dystopia in which we will develop as well, right? They're like already like one step ahead in how everything develops, like in terms of class structure, in class struggle, in terms of divide in society between rich and poor and stuff like this. Because I mean, Korean movies, particular, they always push this like not exaggerate, but amplify this kind of divides that are already there. So maybe this makes for many people, they say like, okay, I consume this Korean culture, but at the same time I see, oh, Korea is like really bad to live in, right? It's like if you're not like part of the rich people. And like one point I wanted um to make in that regard, but I forgot, sorry.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Like this was like just popped up question, and this is like quite spontaneous. Like maybe we can discuss further later, like privately.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was also interested because like we cannot maybe like contain every aspect of like public perception through the survey, maybe like because the Japan was the country they perceive Korea the least favorable. And then like I don't know, like if you ask the questionnaires, like to put the questionnaire in the number or something like 5 to 1 or something, then it's very hard to measure like the cultural background of people, how they actually the most favorable, even too much for Japanese people maybe like to choose. So like then like when you compare the percentage of it can be very like how to say artificial as well. I don't know, like also like German people can say that, to be honest, very authentically, I cannot choose like the most favorite. I don't know, like we have to like firmly investigate about like how the research has been formed. Like,
So it's about the people's own background. I remember what I wanted to say just now because that was on the news a lot too, or is in Germany sometimes on the news, which is like this kind of like I guess like kind of miscellaneous news, but it always pops up and it was discussed again. Education in Korea, of course, right? And it's like a topic that I'm very interested in. And that is always also interestingly portrayed very negative, right? Because on one hand, you have like the PISA results and they're always very positive. You know, Korea is always like in the top percentile. But then what pops up in Germany here in the news is like when the Sunung happens, and then you have some English question that not even English native speakers can answer, right? So they say like, okay, oh wow, they put so much pressure on the kids, and it's so hard to go to university or to study there. And I think that like sometimes they're also displays into this dystopian image. Okay, this is like some kind of hyper capitalist world where like people suffering every day or something. I think that has maybe left some mark also on the which is interesting, is an interesting dynamic because on one hand, you know, of course, it's good that Koreans criticize their situation and like make dramas and movies about it. But of course, if it skews the image of Korea in the world in this direction, it's also problematic, right? Because people think like, oh, in Korea, everybody struggles every day, you know, and if they don't work hard, their boss comes and beat them, and they can go home, even though, you know, some Koreans, I mean, stuff like this happens, of course, but like most Koreans live like a perfectly normal life, right? So there's maybe some kind of mismatch there too.
Probably like the people who consume the like a variety of like Korean product media or something, then like they will realize like the diverse aspect of Korea itself, like societal image of Korea as well. Like so, as you pointed out as well.
Mm.
But anyway, like
maybe the last point, because I talked, sorry, I'm keeping you,
Mm.
but the last point, what is really big right now is hyperyorisa, I think. So that is maybe
Yeah.
something else, right? Like even with random people on the street, or not street, but like people that have nothing to do with Korean, sometimes they mention, oh, I watched this this Korean cooking show now, and it's so exciting. Blah, 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 blah.
Really?
Yeah, so I think that is the newest thing. I think it's also on Netflix. I'm not 100% sure, but
Netflix, yeah.
it's Netflix. Okay, yeah. So, but that seems to be like the which goes back to food, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Time is up. Thank you so much, Dr. Gehlmann.